Hello there. Let's see, let me share this. I have this down to like a system now. Let's see. Post. Started out doing it on my phone, now I just do it on my computer. So that's posted. Nice. Alright, so here we go. It looks great, doesn't it? I love it. Alright, I'm gonna do the other piece to this, like the back piece. Might not be the longest string. Or I might have to go away for something. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, I'm gonna move this for now.
As launched for Halo. Full first-core armor selection in the near future, alongside a variety of new armor components, a couple new game types, as well as the addition of AI into Forge maps, and finally, possibly Firefight has dropped with Halo Infinite. It's a really tasty lineup of new content for the game. The Halo Infinite update has been handled by many as being the first major active update to the Halo Infinite platform, and has definitely seen a notable uptick in the popularity and number of players playing Halo Infinite. So that's all going in the right direction for Halo. But of course, I'm leaving one major detail out here. That's the re-emergence of the Flood. Now, I'm in two minds as to exactly what we're looking at here and how it bodes for the future of Halo's narrative. I'm kind of with it, I'm kind of against it. Let's reason that out together in today's Law and Theory. Cue the intro. Hey everyone, welcome back to Solution 00, and I am more or less fresh back from HCS, the Halo Championship World Series 2023, held at Seattle in the Arch Convention Center. It was an absolute whirlwind of a time, and as I explained to many people that I met there over the weekend, I come from a sleepy little seaside town where basically nobody knows who I am and what I do on the day-to-day. Going from basically living in a life of anonymity to basically walking through the threshold of the Arts Convention Center and immediately being recognized, and then spending the entire weekend with people who are absolutely fanatical and passionate about the Halo universe just as I am, was a real eye-opener. And the holiday blues that have followed have kicked me in the arse quite solidly. But nevertheless, this doesn't change new information that's being released as new updates are being released for Halo Infinite, and this needs to be covered, mainly because it ties in with a few narrative things happening externally to the actual game narrative. I'm going to ask you to cast your minds back to the release of Halo Point of Light. This was a novel that was based majoritively on Zeta Halo, following Ryan Forge and 343 Guilty Spark, now within a Forerunner Armiger platform. This novel continued the voyages of Ryan Forge and the crew of the Ace of Spades, but it also expanded narratively, quite interestingly, aspects of the Forerunner's legacy. In some of the closing pages of the novel, Ryan Forge meets an imprint of the librarian, whom divulges information to her surrounding the librarian's own genetic history and how it relates at least loosely, with that of humanities, and goes on to explain how all things in the galaxy are cyclical, that life grows, flourishes, develops, falls away, and then is rebirthed once more. But at some point or another, there will be another librarian, there will be another Ryan Forge. And all the while she is discussing this with Ryan, she is tending to a species of plant or flower that she has reintroduced to the soils of Bastion, which is a shield world modeled directly after that of Earth, just obviously inside out, and a more polished, refined version of Earth. I, for one, would one day love to see that actually in the game, or at least explored visually, because the idea of a more polished and pure and refined version of Earth, but turned inside out, the same continents, but cleaner and more fauna-esque, would be fascinating. But I digress. Sebastian is the librarian's experimental laboratory, and the plants that she is receiving there are actually derived from the genetic material of the precursors, the ancient Tier Zero transcendent neural physical species that had created life in the galaxy millions of years beforehand, that the foreigners had risen up against. The precursors being the very birth of the flood. This paved the way, narratively speaking, for the return of the precursors. But of course, these plant-like forms would then have to evolve over thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years to get anywhere close to achieving their original form. The intention being that they would eventually achieve the same technological tier as their ancient ancestors, but would be free of the genetic memory of the transgressions against their race, and thus be free of the corruptions that would ultimately fuel their transition into the flood of plague on the galaxy. They would once again be the pure precursors, creators and weavers of life, rather than the harbingers of death, the monument of all our sins. It seemed like a very logical laid out plan. However, that doesn't appear to be what we're seeing in more recent narrative explorations. The recently released book Halo Outcasts took place majoritively on the planet of Netheron. Both human and Sword of Sanguinius forces had been drawn to the planet due to rumors of an ancient artifact or weapon that was capable of killing Guardians. Given that the creative uprising led by the rogue AI Cortana was in full swing at this point, it stood to reason that whatever force controlled this ancient artifact were capable of freeing themselves and their allies from the clutches of creative control. This artifact and the technology therein was far more advanced than the Tier 6 civilization that had existed on the planet centuries earlier. Quite separately to this direct conflict, an individual by the name of Rosa Fertes, suffering from a debilitating, virulent, terminal disease called prion disease, came into contact with entities that simply called themselves the Veiled Ones, then the Lost Ones, and now nothing. These entities offered an injured Rosa a choice of whether to exist or not to exist. She opted for the former, and the entities advised her not to tell anyone of their encounter, and then healed her of her otherwise incurable prion disease. Rosa honored this pledge and remained entirely quiet about this contact, but knew that she had been in contact with the precursors, the very species that were thought to have been wiped out during the Fauna Precursor War, then ultimately corrupted across the eons and turned into the Flood, which were once again nearly wiped out during the Fauna Flood War, and then once again came to resurgence in 2552 with the release of the Flood on Station 04 and the closing events of the Human Covenant War. But of course, these entities were not the Flood. They were not the corrupted versions of themselves. They were the purer, original versions of the precursors, bearing in mind that the precursors are neurophysical in nature and can spontaneously change their form, their profile, their technological sophistication, and their entire imprint on the galaxy at will. And now finally we get up to the most recent events, and that is the flood-infected Spartans that we're seeing in the multiplayer. And this is not to mention the recent intel that's launched alongside Reckoning, where clear evidence of something approximating a flood infestation accessing Spartan armor, infecting the Spartans themselves, and then overriding the armor systems, taking full executive control of the Gen 3 platform. And yes, this could just simply be a flood infestation. It is within the boundaries of capability of the floods to infest both biological hosts, such as the Spartans themselves, and be able to interface directly with the electronic systems of Mjolnir-powered assault armor. And since they're not technically AI-based algorithms, perhaps Mjolnir's AI counter-intrusion algorithms wouldn't be effective against them. Again, the logic plague is testament to the flood's ability to infest electronic systems as well as the biological. So, yes, it could just be flood. However, the final two lines that we're given in Intel Part 1 is unity, sweetness. This echoes both the Great Mind and Primordial's musings on life and the consumption of all life being sweetness, but also the parallels drawn directly to the precursors themselves, who viewed all life and all of his experiences as sweetness for the living universe. Then, when you take all of that into consideration, it draws a very clear picture. The precursors are returning. And this is where we are with the law of moment, and this is now where my opinions step in. And like I said at the start of this video, I'm in two minds about it. Yes, okay, it would be cool for the precursors to come forward, but we've also been told quite clearly, relatively recently, that all narrative associated with the Halo Infinite multiplayer is no longer withstanding. It's no longer a part of Halo. So surely if this is happening within the multiplayer, it's only happening in the multiplayer as part of this particular season's advertising campaign. It's a small narrative nod towards the multiplayer. But then if that's the case, the two aforementioned books that both clearly outline the return of the precursors wouldn't be in place, would they? So what is it? Is the multiplayer actually once again got a narrative, but they haven't actually disclosed that runs in parallel alongside the books and the larger Halo universe? Or is this just kind of a nod in that direction? It's hard to say. My real opinions, however, boil down to a few key points. One, Halo thrives on mystery. Some of the deepest, most lore-saturated moments of Halo to date have been when we haven't been given immense amounts of information, when things remain a mystery, but have just enough information that it spawns interest and intrigue and curiosity into the deeper narrative, and theories and ideas and concepts can be thrown around. That's why the lore and narrative that surrounds Minus and the precursor war and the Foreigners, back when it was just the original Halo trilogy, was so appealing and so immersive. Halo thrives on its mystery. Many would argue when Halo 4 was released and we were finally shown the Foreigners, and more of the Foreigner narrative was opened up to us, both in the Foreigner saga of books and in the deep lore of Halo 4 and Halo 5 itself. We lost something quite special in Halo. We lost the mystery that surrounded the Foreigners. And with the loss of that mystery, some of its appeal went with it. I will say, however, that Halo 4 did a very good job in balancing the loss of the mystery surrounding Foreigners and the introduction of the mysteries surrounding ancient humanity, because proportionally speaking, we still know very little about ancient humanity. So there was something of a balance to be struck in this regard. So it wasn't like we entirely lost mystery, we just supplanted it for a different mystery. My worry is that we're now bringing forward one of the biggest mysteries in Halo, one of the most foundational core bones of the Halo franchise. The entirety of all of the narrative can be traced all the way back to the precursors, and the very introduction of the Flood in Halo CE, that huge plot twist that turned Halo from a space opera into a horror game and made it so addicting back in the day, all can be traced back to the precursors. If we are on the precipice of revealing new information regarding the precursors to the same degree that we were with the Foreigners, and there is nothing else to supplant it, there's nothing else to swap out for it in the same way that the Foreigner mystery disappeared and the Ancient Human mystery came forward, what mystery will be left for Halo? On one hand, the Flood returning. Fantastic. That should happen, and it should have happened a while ago. We've known for quite a long time that the Flood survived deep within High Charity on the Ark because the firing of the replacement installation 04 was done so while it wasn't completed, so it didn't have full effect. So the anti-neural physical nature of it didn't kill the entirety of the Flood within High Charity. And it stands to reason that High Charity, the Ark, wasn't the only location left in the galaxy that held Flood specimens. It seems, at least at face value, that almost all Foreigner facilities, in one way or another, have Flood containment facilities. So the Flood have never actually gone away. They're still in the galaxy. They're just in stasis, or they're out of reach. So yes, the Flood returning, fantastic. It should happen. It needs to happen. It's a big, big piece of the Halo story. But the reveal of the precursors, new information coming to light, lifting the veil of mystery that surrounds them, may be detrimental to Halo's long-term narrative. Because if we lift the veil on that, what's left? Yes, there's some mystery surrounding mendicant bias. There's still some mystery surrounding offensive bias. However, it's clear, based on the legendary ending of Halo Infinite itself, that they were planning on bringing offensive bias into the fold in some degree. So once all that is said and done, what's left? I hope that whatever is planned is executed very, very carefully. Because if the veil of mystery is lifted and there's nothing left to wonder about anymore, Halo will lose a part of itself. Halo will lose that deep appeal. It'll lose its core. And I don't think I can stand like that. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider smashing the like button and leave a comment below what you'd like me to cover next. Shout out to my patrons, Spartan 10148, the Mentark of my installation, Falcon, Prophet Bear, Mikhail, Sophia, and Ashley, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Scarab, Spartan 0137, Anthony, Ghost, Aaron, Chris, Jacob, Sean, and Joe Somatic, Jordan J3, Dan, Mr. Q, Director, Gunslinger, Jacob, Van Mill, Echo, Evermore, Officer Cat, Crushable Devil, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers. And all the other patrons who have jumped aboard to support the channel. That means more to me than I can accurately put into words. Another shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob, Schmitty, Talia, Henry, and Paul Stella, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. Shout out to John for another button. And if you want more of this kind of content, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. But consider jumping aboard yourself as a patron on YouTube member. The channel alive is happy. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy, everyone. Find peace in the domain. The Foreigners are a race of enigmatic and mysterious beings whom, apart from one known individual and a galaxy full of their megastructures, are now almost entirely absent from the galaxy. The installations they leave behind are massive, beautiful, and awe-inspiring. The nature and history of how they came to be saturated in a noble endeavor to be the stewards of the galaxy and guardians of all life that exists within it. But as we know from our own nature, no species is all good, all kind, all wise, all benevolent. In reality, much of the Foreigner's history is stained with the blood of countless beings from countless races. As with any powerful species, their natural duality of good and evil, light and dark, is something they cannot hide and that can be found if you look hard enough. Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today we take a look at the 10 most disturbing aspects of the Foreigners. This is not a list of the most heinous of crimes against life that individuals of the Foreigners have perpetrated, but rather common practices undertaken by the Foreigner species at large as part of their culture, sciences, and technology. It's always disturbing to look at the most disgusting singular acts performed by the most corrupt and depraved individuals in the culture, but it's all the more unsettling realizing that this list of 10 disturbing practices was openly accepted by the entire culture. It sets a bar of tolerance to gruesome acts and the macabre that suggests that if these were acceptable by most people's standards, what did the worst of them get up to? If you weren't creeped out by the Foreigners' known acts of brutality, these 10 practices might just do it for you. So, let's get on and do this. I've spoken at length before about the Foreigners' method of energy harvesting that ultimately powers their immense megastructures in a previous video. Link is in the description if you want the full details. But to summarize it, the Foreigners utilize energy pulled from the quantum vacuum pylons. This, fundamentally, draws energy from the quantum vacuum of untold quantities of alternate realities. Unknowable quantities of nascent universes are spun up and then aborted, siphoning off their immense energy to feed the requirements of the Foreigner megastructures. To put this in simple terms, the Foreigners pull alternate realities, or effectively parallel universes, apart. They capture them and deconstruct these universes in an instant, using the abundant energy that fuels their very existence for their own means. Doing this literally destroyed that reality, that parallel universe, any potential, any development, indeed any life contained within, being ripped apart at a quantum level, literally destroying the very foundation of their reality and converting it to raw energy. This is disturbing enough with just that. But when you consider that the mantle of responsibility is based on the idea that the universe itself is alive, conscious in a way that we simply cannot comprehend, then you realize foreigners were also defiling the very mantle they claim to uphold in their pursuit of energy. They were killing universal consciousnesses, all the life and potential this alternate reality contained, just to power their technology. Imagine being literally torn apart, atom by atom, subatomic particle by subatomic particle, until you simply cease. Any chance of life, an afterlife, any trace of your past, any instant of your present, and any moment of your future, torn to bits, along with the entire reality that surrounds it, being converted into a raw, fundamental energy and then being drawn through to a machine to be siphoned and distributed as a fuel to power a construct of unknowable complexity. This is how the Forerunners harvest their energy. The mantle of responsibility at face value isn't disturbing at all. Protection and shielding of all sentient life in the galaxy from harm. But you see, the mantle is subject to interpretation. The original mantle of responsibility as conceived by the precursors, or possibly even just passed to them from whomever or whatever created them, wasn't exactly as the forerunners followed and upheld it. The precursor's mantle was more so to allow life to exist and develop, ebb and flow with the universe's will in an organic cycle of life, advancement, decline, death, and rebirth over and over again. They intervened occasionally and shared knowledge and advancement by means of assisted, accelerated, or designed evolution, but ultimately left life to exist on life's terms, allowing the most worthy species of each galaxy they visited to take the mantle of responsibility as they saw it and continue the precursor's work in their absence. When the foreigners learned they weren't to inherit the mantle and instead would pass to humanity, they began rising against the precursors, their very creators, and striking with a military force so powerful, aggressive, and unexpected that the precursors didn't have a chance to respond. They hunted the precursors to near extinction and took the mantle of responsibility for their own. Then they used this to enforce an imperial peace. The mantle, to the foreigners, meant that the foreigners remain at a position of preeminence within the galaxy and forced their protection upon any and all life in the galaxy, whether they wanted it or not. And any act of the species under their enforced protection seemed to be contravening their rule or wanting to live by their own terms, were immediately viewed as being in defiance of the foreigners and thus in defiance of the mantle itself. This was nearly always met with sudden and decisive action from the foreigners. When humanity chose to live as they desired, developed an alliance with Sansham and began spreading away from the foreigners' rule, the foreigner paid a significant amount of attention to them and their activities, with inklings of the age-old resentment of humanity being chosen to find lingering at the edges of the foreigner's intentions. When the flood ultimately forced the human empire to flee foreign colonies and systems and resettle within foreigner-controlled systems, while also culling flood-infested foreign systems. The foreigners didn't take the time to analyze the reasons or even ask humanity why they were doing this. They moved immediately to war. Despite humanity's valiant efforts, the foreigners utterly destroyed ancient humanity, devolving the remaining populace back to hunter-gatherers and fragmenting their evolutionary profile into dozens of lesser developed species of human. On top of this, they disarmed and quarantined the Sanshai into their home system and composed and analyzed the memories of hundreds of ancient humans in a desperate attempt to find a suggested cure to the flood. The mantle of responsibility was defiled time and time again by the foreigners as they misinterpreted its ideals, stealing it from their creators and the rightful inheritors of the mantle and enforcing their own will across the galaxy with unrelenting military action. It is also reasonable to assume that the precursors, humanity and the Sanshayim, were not the only victims of this martial peace. They led an authoritarian dictatorship disguised as stewardship of life, both literally and figuratively, offering a hand to uplift life while simultaneously keeping a boot firmly planted on life's throat. A big aspect of foreigner culture was the way in which they refined themselves to be more fitting to a particular purpose within their societal structure. This was achieved by a process called mutation. Mutation was a foreigner term referred to customizing biological maturation to new forms or rates, entailing a carefully adjusted combination of genetic engineering, gene therapy, and biochemical manipulation. A foreigner's mutation determined the individual's place within their family, mantle, guild, and society overall. The process was typically performed between 2 to 5 times over the course of an individual's life. In a general sense, this basically means that they genetically manipulated their own bodies during life to tailor their physical form and mind to set structures of their society. They'd mutate themselves even further from their own natural base to be nearly unrecognizable as an individual of their original species. Moleculars, or young faunas, were, in appearance, strikingly close to humans. After several of these mutations, however, the faunas could grow additional limbs, grow immensely tall, much larger muscles, grow to be stockier, more intelligent, but all of this comes with a cost. Many of the natural aspects of their emotional state were overwritten with cold, hard logic. Smiling and laughter, for example, is something innate in all of us. Laughter is something we just do. It has powerful social implications and allows for us to express a plethora of emotions in an instant. It allows excess emotional energy to overflow and present as something others can interpret and share. To the foreigners, smiling and laughter were seen as archaic and in truth quite revolting and barbaric. It is reasonable to assume other fundamentally essential expressions of emotion were seen with equal levels of disdain. Second to this, the very need to mutate to suit a role reveals not only that the faunas were somewhat unwilling to undergo the process that is required to action change. If you wanted to be the world's strongest man, for example, you'd go to the gym, you'd work out 5, 6, 7 days a week, you'd eat the right food, you'd push yourself, undergo strain and stress and possible injury to force your body to adapt. Over time, with immense levels of will, determination, and routine, you get there. Yet the foreigners could simply inject themselves with genetic serum and voila, they're stronger than any human has ever been or likely ever will be. Or, in the words of Malcolm, I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're thinking it didn't require just further to this, the very fact they mutated to meet certain roles means their society had stagnated. A foreigner could hope to be really only one of four rates. These rates had essentially only one job each. Builders built stuff, warrior servants fought wars, miners dug up raw materials, light workers probably had the most varied job but were basically zoologists, vets, and medical doctors all in one. You had the choice of one of these four jobs. That's it. If you wanted to be an artist, nope, no artists. You wanted to be a musician, nope, no music. Wanted to be a YouTuber, nope, no YouTube. You can build stuff, kill stuff, dig up stuff, or heal stuff. That's about it. This stagnation wasn't a recent thing either. Millions of years of foreign society were bounded by this structure. No room for creativity, no room for personality, no room for being an individual. You were born into a family that performed a certain duty, and that was your lot. There is something massively unsettling about a culture that has stagnated and doesn't tolerate or allow individuality, creativity, or curiosity. In fact, the foreigner born to make eternal lasting was born to a builder family, but didn't want to be a builder. He wanted to explore the universe in search of knowledge of the precursors and their artifacts. He was curious, creative, emotionally driven. His father, at his rate, saw him as a rebellious and somewhat problem child. His father shipped him off to learn discipline from a miner family in the Sol system. By discipline, this basically meant he was sending him to a rate less fortunate than his own to work against his will. It would legitimately be the equivalent of sending a naughty child from the developed world to live with a poor third world family of quarriers for some extended forced physical labor. Any joy, any independence, any creativity harbored in the minds of their youths was squashed out and replaced with, you are this, you will do this, this is all there is, and you are going to accept it. Robbing any child of their chance to be a child is disgusting and disturbing. Robbing a child of their childhood isn't the worst of mutation, however. One particular aspect of the mutation was called pattern transfer. The mutation of an individual would undergo was always patterned after an individual's mentor, typically, but not always, their parent. This basically means
I'm
that
look
the
at the next
individual
page.
would receive a copy of the consciousness of their mentor, which would gradually integrate and overwrite their original consciousness over a period of several years. Slow enough to appear as a normal developmental change when in reality what was effectively happening being overwritten with a copy of their mentor, who would have received the same process from their mentor, and the same from theirs, and so on for millions of years. This means it is likely that all faunas alive during this period were simply copies of the faunas who instigated this system in the first place. No diversity, no natural evolution, no new ideas, no new thoughts, no new mind, and no new perspectives. They would have all been overwritten and destroyed by the mutation process and replaced them with the same consciousness as those who implemented the first mutations in fauna history. Their older ideals and mannerisms being perpetuated for generation after generation with no room for change. This is wrong on the level of societal evolution and the progress of the new species as time goes on and the values and ideals change, but to literally erase a child's personality over several years while the ego of an ancient decrepit mind slowly takes over their brain like a parasite. In this regard, the faunas bear some striking similarities to the flood. And really, when you think, the fauna has made this happen slowly, gradually, over many years, so as to be met with the least resistance possible, being interpreted by the original personality as simply being an organic change, when it was actually a hostile takeover of the body by a parasitic and invasive ego. At least the flood had the decency of being quick and to the point about it. Endurance is a device which contains an extracted personality impression and memories of an individual. These serve a few functions, some being the innermost workings of fauna automated platforms such as the monitors and Promethean Knights, while others are used to store the imprint and last memories of an individual who has died. To do this, a fauna's armor would temporarily store the thoughts, feelings, and memories and personality of the fauna in question for the moments leading up to their death. This could then be transferred from their armor to the Durance and given to the family, along with some plasma from the immolation of the body, as a sort of epitaph. At face value, this seems like a nice gesture of kindness to the mourning family and a clever way to power their autonomous machines. But when you consider that the imprints are often so complete that the personality itself is actually self-aware, then it becomes troubling. If consciousness continues after death and transfers with the imprint, then the individual who has died is forced to relive the moments before they died over and over and over again until the Durance meets its half-life of 1,000,000 years. While generally speaking, faunas died of old age rather than in traumatic occurrences such as war or violence, meaning the imprint's last memories would likely have been being surrounded by their loved ones and passing peacefully in their bed. Faunas were not the only species who were imprinted onto Durances. Humans were often imprinted onto Durances to power Promethean Knights and monitors such as the W Spunk. In the case of the Knights, those humans would have been composed. The composition process is levels of disturbing unto its own, but the reality is that the instances of composition we have witnessed aren't exactly events of serenity and acceptance. This means that the consciousness that is imprinted into the Durance is forced to relive the horrors of having their body disintegrated by neural physical energy streams while simultaneously extracting their mental pattern. On top of this, the free will of the personality is then overwritten with digital construct code and forced to do the bidding of the faunas, in some cases turning against their own species and slaughtering allies with no ability to stop themselves. Even if consciousness doesn't continue after death and the original being is actually dead, this copy of the original being still appears to be self-aware and thus has to realize in some capacity the realities I've just highlighted. This isn't just disturbing, it's fundamentally sick. A krypton is a sealed capsule where a high-ranking fauna would enter self-imposed exile. often as a punishment for failure or dishonor. In this regard, the individual could be regarded as acting on their own volition, but again, these exiles were often enacted as a consequence of public shaming the eyes of the other race and the Achaemenid council. Backroom dealings, manipulation, and political agendas often highlighted individuals with enough influence as to be an inhibiting factor to achieving goals that the controlling parties would otherwise wish to see accomplished. An excuse was often then fabricated or events influenced to shame an individual, forcing the otherwise honor-bound individual into a self-imposed exile, thereby effectively removing them as an obstacle to the other party's interests. This happened with the Erdidant as a consequence of posing a significant obstacle to the master builder's plans to reform the Achaemenid council to having the builder rate as the most powerful and influential rate. The reason that the crypton is disturbing is because the individual would be prepared for exile by undergoing a ritual of consuming intracoa, a chemical designed to desiccate the physical body of the individual. They would then be locked within the crypton, a millennial seal enclosed and activated, preserving the mind of the individual indefinitely, but keeping the body in a vitrified state, devoid of practically any moisture. The mind of the one within is said to be linked directly to the domain. During this time, the mind of the occupant can wander endlessly within the domain. This, for many, is a daunting concept. But worse than this is if, as with the Erdidant, the domain wasn't active when placed within its crypton, in which case the occupant spends however long the crypton is locked, trapped within their own mind, unable to interact with anyone, cry for help, move, or do anything to otherwise spare their mind of the possible eons of solace. This is a crime worse than death, because at least death has an end. When or if the person is awoken, their body is as close to a mummified corpse as is possible to be, and is not given reviving fluids and a bath of fluids to continue the recovery. The individual likely wouldn't have the strength to continue living, slowly choking and suffocating to death as their bodies lack any moisture and thus any ability to move, even down to the lungs and heart.
All right. Next part.
Reseeding was performed across the galaxy as a contingency to restore life to a galaxy after the halo array was fired. But in order to catalogue species for reseeding, the foreigners needed to gather genetic material, sex cells, and live physical specimens of every species catalogued. In this regard, the foreigners would have acted at this time in a similar manner to the stories we hear of alien abductions. Humans, for example, would likely be held in captivity, with surgical procedures performed to extract genetic material, sperm, and egg cells, and some individuals would be abducted altogether and sealed within hardware containment units. These would be time-locked metal monolith type structures. The individual being placed inside and getting activated, sealing the being inside in a kind of suspended animation. They would then be transported to Earth, where, at least in some cases, they'd be let out, having somehow some disclaims about being an alien construct far beyond the limit of the galaxy. Bearing in mind at this stage, humanity had been evolved to be that of cavemen. Their minds were thus completely capable of comprehending what happened and where they were. After the firing of the array, these individuals would be forced back into containment and transported back to their now ancient homeworld. They'd be released onto the planet and abandoned. Not being considered what happened to all of their loved ones, just left, while their feelings were otherwise scattered about the world. Catalogue was the main given to a collective entity within the foreigner juridical right. Catalogue was charged with recording, preserving, and allowing information into the network. And this was required for the investigation of criminal by citizens of the foreigner entity, and as such were important to the foreigner organization. There were hundreds of the individual each fauna took on the role of catalog, they were simply all referred to as the singular being of life. Each individual fauna catalog was encased in a coffin-like mechanical carapace. Rather the fauna within, optimum observation recording abilities thus facilitating their roles as information records, and allowing it to intervene quickly and efficiently while contacting the network as often as necessary. The coffin-like carapace is where things start to sound weird. I'm assuming the biological body of the fauna was reduced into shriveled, misshapen form in a similar manner to the krypton. Catalog carapace only needing the mind of the occupant to function and leaving the body's requirements as non-essential. The carapace also acted as a life support system for the withered body within. Generally speaking, the fauna within was a shamed individual and was somewhat forced to become a catalogue, a more openly accepted way of dealing with problem individuals in the krypton, but no less unpleasant. If a member of catalogue chose to disconnect from the carapace, their body would be so weak, withered, malformed, and incapable it would suffocate, which was, unsettlingly, considered an honourable death in the event of failure. Again, this sounds to me as a fate worse than death, confined to a coffin-like device tasked with simply recording events, all individuality removed in place of a singular, objectified title of catalogue, knowing that if you really wanted out, you could disconnect yourself, but ultimately simply suffocate to death as a consequence. After a long enough time period of servitude to the acumen and the juridicals, this fate, I'm sure, would begin looking ever more preferable to their waking reality. The composer was obviously going to be on this list. The composer is a device powered by neural physics, a concept mastered by the precursors but only partially understood by the foreigners, that translates a being's mind into machine data to be used for varying purposes. The original design included using it on older foreigners to transfer their minds into younger bodies, thereby facilitating a kind of immortality. Later, the idea of simply mind uploading and translating the mind to a sentient machine or directly to the domain was pursued and eventually was conceived as a way to cure a blood infection. None of these functions achieved any semblance of long-term success. The process was highly flawed, likely due to the foreigner's lack of complete understanding of the nature of neural physics. In addition to being extremely painful to the individuals undergoing the process, all attempts to restore the essences to biological form failed, as artificial bodies would quickly decay and inevitably die. The physical effects of the composer on its target were also violent. The device projected a beam of powerful energy which completely reduces the target individuals to ash in a rather gruesome manner, burning away their skin, muscle, bones in an agonizing sequence that is quite obviously terrifying to experience firsthand. This is definitely one of the foreigner's more disturbing practices. After being disintegrated, the being would still have to experience their mind being transferred and converted, and ultimately then being used by the foreigner's will to enact actions they have no control over. The halo effect, firing of the array, it is difficult to grasp the sheer level of destruction that this galaxy-spanning superweapon can cause. The actual overlapping pulse from the array would target the nervous systems of all sentient species and destroy them. It is reasoned that the composer has something to do with this, as it appears that composers are a fundamental aspect of a halo's firing mechanism. The pulse appears to simply destroy the central nervous system altogether, likely with high energy particles that resonate at the same frequency as neural networks. This would basically be like experiencing extreme, instantly fatal levels of radiation exposure, but it only damaging your nervous system. destroying everything that can be considered the conscious version of you, leaving behind an empty corpse. The halo ray doesn't disintegrate the leftover biomass, and as such, the forerunners would employ the use of a solute that would dissolve the bodies into the component molecules. In our normal lives, we are unfortunately familiar with extinction. We have caused the extinction of some species. Further to this, we can at least comprehend a planetary-wide extinction level event. The asteroid which wiped out the dinosaurs is a prime example of an extinction level event that destroyed over 75% of all life on Earth. But now, scale this up. Our planet is a single habitable planet orbiting a main sequence star. There are 100 billion stars in our galaxy, with an estimated 50% of them with planets in the habitable zone around their host star. Imagine causing the complete 100% extinction of all sentient life in the galaxy. This is what the foreigners did. And despite their convincing plan to receive the galaxy, there is no way in hell they actually managed to catalog and index every sentient species in the galaxy. Meaning there are swathes of species made extinct that will never be seen again. The foreigners were a massively powerful race. They had a galaxy-spanning empire and some of the galaxy's most impressive megastructures. Yet as the scale and power of a species grows, so does the risk that species poses to the rest of life. The foreigners grew to such an extent as to be the galaxy's best chance of surviving something as horrible as the flood, but their ego and their ignorance led them to being one of the biggest threats to life across the galaxy. There are lessons to be learned here. Humanity has grown extremely fast over the past 100,000 years and terrifyingly fast in the past 200. We have grown to be a powerful species, and our scale has grown to cover every continent of Earth. With that power and with that growth, we are the Earth's best chance at survival in the future. But we are also the biggest threat to Earth's continued survival. So let's learn from the foreigners' failures and endeavour not to destroy our one and only home. Thanks for watching. Stick your comments down below. I look forward to what you have to say. Pretty dark and heavy episode, but I enjoyed writing it at least. I want to give a shout out to my patrons: Nick the Sonic Cartographer, Brian, Sebastian, Betsy, Darian, Stalker of the Realms, Falcon X003, Alvin, DW, Flaming Halo, and Revanche, the Holt of the Mantle, my glorious reclaimers, my loyal Metarchs, and all of the other patrons that have jumped aboard to support the channel. You guys are awesome, and all this would not be possible without you. If you like Halo Lore discussed in same level of detail, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you're told the second a new video hits the shelves. Be sure to support us on all major social media channels, including Discord. And if you really love the channel, consider heading over to Patreon and support the channel over there. It would mean the world to me and would free up more of my time for me to bring this content and other Halo-related goodness. Take it easy, everyone, and find peace in the domain. Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel. When I made my video a couple days ago about the many problems with Dave Filoni's writing and the way he approaches Star Wars and disrespects fans and so forth, it was a short video because I try to keep my videos no more than 15 minutes long in general. But a lot of people pointed out, how did you fit the many problems with Dave Filoni in such a short video? And it is true, you can talk to a great extent about this. But I did think two points that I made, I think, could use some further explanation. I haven't received any kickback from those comments, but I can imagine Dave Filoni fans, some responses they might make to those comments. So I wanted to take a minute and kind of get ahead of that counter argument and point out why it's still not really valid. So the first point I made, or well, one of the points I made, talking about Dave Filoni is in his particular writing, is that he is unable to show character progression. I talked about how Ahsoka, for example, in the Clone Wars, she was bratty, people just like her, she's annoying, and fans of Dave Filoni will say, no, but they fixed that. They fixed that, that they changed her, they aged her up. Yeah, that's not really character progression. That's just a jump. Now she's older, time's passed, she's a little older, wears different clothes, she acts different. Here's why that's a problem. Because somebody might say, well, so what? You can never have a time jump in your story? Is that bad writing? No, of course not. There are great examples of that. The one that comes to mind immediately is Frank Herbert's Dune, the original Dune novel. Wonderful. And you have a significant time jump between books 1 and 2 of that first novel. And I'm not going to say that I was expecting that necessarily the first time I read it through, but it wasn't jarring. It didn't feel like once the time jump happened, I thought, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense because that first book is talking about, and by book I mean the book 1 of the first novel. I talk about further books in the series, but that first book's talking about Paul's the things he goes through and the change that happens, and then when he's there with the Fremen, he's going to be there for a while. He's going to be growing, and you already are cued in to the progression and the things that he's going to learn. He's already kind of taking his steps down that path. So you don't really need to see the minutia of it. When book 2 happens, it's, oh, okay, yeah, okay, this is what I'm expecting. Now let's get on to some more action and events happen. That's fine. That's not what Dave Filoni does. He didn't do that with Clone Wars. He didn't do that with Rebels and more of his live action stuff. With Ahsoka, it was just, now she's different. We didn't see her leading to that difference because you never showed her learning from her mistakes. That one classic episode where she's just killing off her whole, platoon of clones and everything like that, and is mad or sad because she's getting in trouble for it, isn't really mad or sad because she's oh my gosh, what have I done? No, no, no. And Anakin's like, it's okay, Snips, everything's fine. And the end of that episode is all about her realizing that she needs to trust herself no matter what, even if she kills people along the way. She needs to say, no, I'm in charge. We're going to do it like this. It's grating. It's infuriating to watch. That's a Mary Sue. What more do you need? That is textbook Mary Sue. And people say, well, she changed. She changed. We didn't see her moving toward that change. There's just a time jump, and then suddenly she's older, and she doesn't act that way as much. Yet because there's no written integrated progression in her change, we didn't see her heading toward that change. When she's there, we're not even seeing a look back at the change that she's made. Because of that, she still slips back into it many, many times after the supposed change that she's made. That famous episode where they go to the Citadel and they're trying to rescue, blanking the Jedi Master's name, the dwarfish guy. She's back to bratty little Ahsoka. I want to go. Master said I couldn't, but I think I should anyway, so I'm just going to do it. And the episode rewards her for that. Plo Koon tells her, oh, apparently going to do it. So do whatever you want to, Ahsoka. And this speaks to a greater theme that Filoni tried to bring to Star Wars, and it's very integral to all of his live action garbage he's doing right now, which is the theme of don't play by the rules. The Jedi will corrupt. Look, they were well-meaning. There were some good people in the system. The system. He really brought that, and that wasn't a thing that was in the Star Wars universe before that. Yes, there was some measure of the Jedi. Obviously, Palpatine had blinded them to his own dark side, and maybe you could Yoda might talk about a little hubris or whatever and stuff like that. But the Jedi were the good guys. That was never questioned. Filoni brought this whole like, oh, question the organization and the power structure and by how they victimize poor Ahsoka. And she's like, I'm done, I'm leaving, and then she goes and hooks up with Bo-Katan and stop saving all the lives you're saving. Do my mission anyway because it's more important. You know, it's just that absurd kind of writing, and Filoni introduced that little theme, and now it's just needled and needled and needled, and he's still doing it with his live action stuff. No, that's not Star Wars. That's just an example of how he's changing it. The other point that I made was about the limited types of characters that he can write. And specifically, I pointed out the limited types of females that he can write. You can look at his male type characters as well. And I just kind of briefly mentioned it, and I pointed out, and I showed little pictures in the video of how he can only write the young Mary Sue's, the wise matron type characters, or the femme fatale villains. Now, somebody just hearing me say that might say, well, hang on, what? I mean, come on, you're all about archetypes, aren't you? You got in adventure stories like this, yeah, you're going to have the young warriors, the older, more mature, you know, with wisdom, and then you're going to have the villains. I mean, what other types are there? To an extent, that's correct, but that's not what I mean. I don't just mean he can write young warriors. No, he writes young Mary Sues, who are already amazing. They shan't be questioned. If they make a mistake, it's actually a brilliant mistake that's going to open up new ways and think outside the box and blah, blah, blah. This is Sabine Wren to the T. This is Ahsoka Tano. This is any of the popular, what's her name, Omega, the Bad Batch. That's that brand. He's not writing, and you juxtapose that with somebody like a Princess Leia, both in the original trilogy and in the EU. She was so much more profound than that, so much more three-dimensional than that. Yes, she was a young woman, a young warrior even, but she didn't need to be a young warrior and prove herself. She was a young diplomat at first. That was darn good enough. She was a fine diplomat. You read some of the books in the EU before she's really trained with Jedi ways yet. She's phenomenal. She's integral. You need her in that role. She can be a warrior as she eventually learns. She is a damsel in distress at times, and there's no shame in that. You need saving at times. She helps to do the saving at times. She is also has a legitimate love interest, a legitimate heteronormative love interest. Oh my gosh, gasp! And she's a great part in a love story with that. She's you can't just label her in one little quick thing. Filoni would have done that if he'd have been writing her. She's, you know, in fact, he does that in the way she shows up in Rebels and stuff like that at times. So that's the Mary Sue, for example, the matron character. You know, the Luminare or Luminara or Sakura, even Hera. You know, just we're wise, we're together. They're the mother type, the mother type. Well, again, you know, go back to Leia, somebody who actually becomes a mother of twins and then another child doesn't have to stop being any of these other great things. She can still be impetuous at times and still have to learn from her mistakes at times, even though she is wise. You know, and you can press out of those examples. And as I said in that previous video, you might be able to look at some instances and say Clone Wars, for example, say, well, no, you know, this character did do that. And again, you've got other writers who are working with him there. But the reason you know it's Filoni is because you look at the series that he's the head honcho of, Clone Wars, Rebels, Bad Batch, the live action stuff, and these problems consistently show up again and again and again. This is how he perceives. I think it was Gore Vidal who said a wonderful quote that I'll put up on the screen if I remember. He said that every writer has a certain cast of types of characters in their mind. And it's true. And the more blessed writers have a larger cast. But these are types. And I see it in my own writing. You see it in anybody's writing, where they write a new novel and there's a new character, but that character is very similar to that type of character in the other one. Stephen King, for example, a great writer, but you see certain types of characters, as in any other writer, certain types of characters reappear. He likes to write about the young author, the young teacher, you know, which is very much him drawing on his own personal experience. So, like his protagonist in Salem's Lot is very similar to his protagonist in Joyland, different time of life, period of life, which is very similar to I'm blanking on the character's name right now, but the main character in It, the young boy who grows up to be an author. You know, he's got these certain types of characters. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, as I said, if you've got enough of a cast, of a wide variety of cast, if you're not writing the same story over and over again. Filoni doesn't. Filoni has very limited number of characters that he can cast, character types that he can cast, and it shows up, as I said, in the limited female characters. He's got limited villains. He's got limited main characters. Any male authority figure is always in need of correction, is always in need of some introspection. Hey, buddy, you need to rethink your basis for authority, Mr. Patriarchy. Oh, don't say that. Baloney's not like that. He's one of us. He's fighting for us. A lot of nonsense there. Anyway, I could talk more about that, but I just wanted to further expound on a couple of points that I myself saw in that first video. That people who disagree with me could point this or that out, so I should further explain that so it doesn't fall prey to that counter argument. There's more to say, obviously. I will still link in this video the link to the video I linked in the last video, which is Shed Talks or She Talks, I pronounce that. A great video going in further detail with further definitions. I think his video is like 20 plus minutes long. And you can find other people's pointing this out as well, these problems with his writing. Hollywood, major publication industries, they like to give everything to one person who just often isn't qualified for it. But because they got a win or they got a victory with this or that over here, they get everything. And it's not good storytelling. The corporates, they don't care about storytelling, they care about money. Or agenda when you got the ideologues in there, because agenda trumps profit for sure. But that's what we're seeing, and we can point out more. Maybe I'll do another video more that really points out how Filoni's Star Wars is privileging agenda over storytelling. People don't like to admit it. Privileging agenda over storytelling. In my last video, I'll link to it if you just happen to find on this video without seeing that last one. I point out how he is trying to remake Star Wars into the Ahsoka Tano story, steadily, bit by brick, every era by every era. She's the connective tissue. She's the guiding voice. She's the force itself. I mean, it's just nonsense. So I'll stop there. I'll come back with more, certainly. And don't forget, of course, might as well pitch our Star Wars EU book studies that we do on Tuesday nights. Right now, we're going through Shatterpoint, brilliant book, and we'll certainly do more from different eras. So that's all for now. Until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.
He's as good a review as you're gonna get for now. I'll turn it the other way. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Gotta go to a meeting.